You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and let's start today with this Canadian-U.S. crossover murder that still has so many unanswered questions. We'll begin with 45-year-old Luciano Fradolin, the man who packaged himself as something we are now learning he's not. He had the professional headshots, the lifestyle, the glitzy Instagram profile, the business owner persona, the Montreal high-end rental. He had all the outward expressions of a successful coffee company owner. But when he appeared in court on Monday, facing charges of murdering his 9-year-old daughter, he told the judge he was destitute. He could not hire a lawyer, and he would need to have a public defender. Luciano was born in Ethiopia, his mother being Ethiopian and his father being Italian. He lived in a small remote village of Gambella. He claimed on his company's website that he spent his childhood running between rows of crimson coffee buds on the Ethiopian family plantation. He said his mixed ethnicity led to some incidences of racism and that he often felt isolated. Now, it's too early to tell if these platitudes on his company website were genuine or manufactured like his Instagram profile, but it seems the turning point for Luciano happened in 2019. He had hinted previously that a series of what he called unfortunate events had occurred in his life. Now he's vague about those events, but we do know that in 2019, he and his wife became estranged. And whatever personal demons he had going along with that strained relationship with his former wife, all of it was heightened with his financial woes. Luciano was more than $200,000 in debt, stemming from his bad business dealings in Montreal. He had dreams of being a successful entrepreneur. In 2022, he rented a luxury property in the trendy neighborhood of Mile End in Montreal. He then hired 2 property managers to handle the subletting of the property as an Airbnb rental. Now, sometimes he would stay there, and then sometimes he was renting the property on the vacation website. Now, the Airbnb income wasn't enough to cover his initial rental fee, and he fell behind, $26,000 behind. Eventually, the lease was terminated by Luciano's landlord in August of 2024. Faced with owing that money, Luciano turned around and sued the 2 property managers for over $115,000. He was alleging in the lawsuit that the managers never made the rental payments as promised in their contract. The 2 managers have countered that claim, saying that Luciano was making plans to flee the country. They feared he would empty the bank account. Now, Luciano has denied their claims. All in all, the Bank of Nova Scotia says that Luciano owes around $83,000 of loan debt on the Depanneur Cafe. That was a coffee shop he previously owned that went out of business. The bank is also saying he owed $97,000 in credit card debt on Cafe Gambella. That's the retail storefront of his coffee company, which is also failing, by the way. Now, does this sound like a man in desperation? He's got a failed marriage, overwhelming debt, failed businesses, loss of housing. I think that's a recipe for desperation. And that leads us to July 11th. That's when Luciano picked up his daughter for a summer vacation in New York and Connecticut. The father and daughter went ahead. They spent the week visiting the U.S. and towards the end, stopping in Lake George and Saratoga Springs. That was on their last day through the beautiful countryside as they weaved their way back up towards Montreal, Canada. On July 19th at 5:30 that evening, Luciano and Melina were seen on video surveillance footage in Saratoga Springs, New York. An hour later, Melina called her mom. She wasn't in distress. Quite the opposite, actually. She had let her mom know that they were headed back her way to Canada and that she would be home tomorrow. 3.5 hours later, after Melina spoke with her mom, Luciano called 911. He told dispatch that he had pulled over on the side of Interstate 87 to pee, because when you're a male, the world is your urinal. And he was saying that Melina was behind him as he went off the side of the roadway into the lush green forest to, presumably gain some privacy. He then said he turned around and there was no Melina, but that he did see a white van pulling away. That evening, investigators made the call. They put out an Amber Alert for Melina Fradalin. As law enforcement fanned out, looking for any signs of the white van and hoping the public would respond to the overnight Amber Alert, detectives kept interviewing Luciano. That's when his story changed, at least according to the police chief. He now was saying that he saw more than the white van. He was now explaining that two unknown and unidentifiable males had, quote, forced his daughter into the white van before it sped off. Now, this next part, I'm reading some context clues here. 3 different articles reference that Luciano had visited an area near Lake Ticonderoga. Okay, that's about an hour north of where he said Melina was abducted. Now, they don't say when he visited, but if they had locations available via his cell phone, they might be referring that he visited the area sometime between Melina's call to her mom at 6:30 p.m. and Luciano's call to 911 3.5 hours later. That would be plenty of time to travel to Lake Ticonderoga and back to the alleged peeing stop. Whatever it was that investigators knew, they searched the area near Lake Ticonderoga. And about 24 hours after Melina was reported missing, Melina was discovered by New York State Police forest rangers in a shallow pond near the lake. According to court documents from Monday's hearing, investigators say they were able to establish that the white van story was just made up. They say evidence shows no white van was in the area. When Melina was found, her cause of death was not listed. But on Tuesday, the coroner released her cause of death publicly. Dr. Michael Sikarica ruled that Melina died of asphyxia due to drowning, and her death has been ruled a homicide. During the search, law enforcement was in constant contact with Luciano. So, when they found the body, and when they established his story was bogus, and they used technology to cement their timeline, it was a quick arrest on Sunday evening. Luciano was charged with second-degree murder and concealment of a body. He pled not guilty to the charge in court hearings on Monday. Luciano doesn't have a criminal record, but as we learned earlier, his life was unraveling. He is currently embroiled in at least 5 lawsuits. I mentioned the details of one of those lawsuits with his former 2 property managers, but there's others, including the loans at the Nova Scotia Bank, which are past due. On his profile for the Gambella Coffee Company, Luciano used to have a bio page. Since his arrest, it's been scrubbed. But in that bio page, Luciano referenced his daughter. He called her the light of his life and said she was, quote, the inspiration for, well, everything. He then went on and wrote the following. My pursuits for building a more equitable and just world are deeply guided by my determination that Melina will not have to endure the same social injustices that I encountered throughout my childhood. Seeing the world through her eyes has also helped me look for creative ways to reinforce and empower Melina to know, feel, and understand her own unique individual beauty and intellect, while also teaching her to celebrate those same virtues inherent in the world's diversity. I'll watch this case for any new updates, and I'll let you know when I know. New York State Police are still asking for the public's help in building the case surrounding Melina's murder. Anyone with information is urged to call NYSP at 518-873-2750. Let me know what you think of this case in the comments. And now to this case about the murder of Cindy Cicerone Seith, a 54-year-old Spirit Airlines flight attendant. Now, with all of the crazy stories that come out of Spirit Airlines and the behavior of the passengers, you might think something happened on the job, but that wasn't what happened. She was in her flight attendant uniform, but she was off the clock, headed to her home in Palm Beach County, Florida. Ambushed near her front porch just after midnight, her rolling suitcase discarded on the sidewalk as she was shot once in her head in those early morning hours of July 14th. Now, was it a random killing? No, not even close, at least according to authorities. See, Cindy had just completed her divorce from Dr. Richard Seith a 53-year-old ophthalmologist who owned Treasure Coast Eye Specialists in Stuart, Florida. The divorce was finalized in May of this year, and with the divorce came an expected settlement. Richard owed Cindy approximately $285,000. This money was awarded in the divorce to cover the mortgage on the condo that she received as part of the divorce settlement. Now, the divorce hadn't been without turbulence. Cindy had warned her friends that Richard was verbally and emotionally abusive. She even said she was concerned for her life. One friend told KFYR-TV that Cindy had said she was scared of her husband, that on numerous occasions he had become a, quote, not nice man. And Cindy's behavior matched what her friends were telling police. Cindy had gone to the extreme and mounted a motion-activated dash cam on her car. This is part of a protection plan for a woman that would be exiting and entering her condo alone and at late evening, early morning hours. Her actions were fortuitous because right after Cindy was shot there on her front sidewalk, her dash cam, which had been activated by the motion of the shooting, caught a shadowy figure who looked to be a male leaning over the car and retrieving something. Detectives believe that man was Richard Seith, and they believed that he was retrieving a GPS tracker that he had previously hid on Cindy's car. See, with that tracker, he would have known when she was returning home from her flight attendant job, and he would have been able to lie in wait for her to park her car and get out. Pretty quickly, cops got a search warrant for Richard's home and ophthalmology clinic, and boy, did they find some treasures. The searches turned up guns, ammunition, a silencer, and a kit that turns a handgun into a short-barreled rifle. They also discovered that Richard owned a GPS tracker, the one they believed had been pulled from Cindy's car. And guess what? Richard canceled the subscription to that tracker just 3 hours after Cindy was murdered. Now, of course, Richard was questioned after the murder. And initially, Richard told detectives that he hadn't seen his ex-wife since December of 2024. But detectives are now saying they have evidence of Richard stalking Cindy for months. A witness claims that they saw Richard in the Lake Worth neighborhood where Cindy was murdered at the condo just the night before the murder. And I know witnesses can't always be reliable, but Richard doesn't drive a nondescript four-door sedan. He drives a bright orange Jeep Wrangler, and it's very easy to remember and recognize. It's also very easy to track on highway cams. And Richard has a history of stalking with another woman. This was a former girlfriend who previously filed a petition for injunction for protection against Richard and his stalking behavior. Okay, all of this happened back in 2014, before Richard and Cindy were married. The woman says she met Richard on Match.com, and she says it didn't work out. She said Richard had become very aggressive while they were dating. Well, when the woman found out that Cindy and Richard were getting married, she befriended Cindy. Now, it doesn't say if she was trying to warn Cindy. Maybe she was. Or maybe it was just a legit friendship between the two. But whatever the intention, they became friends. And she is saying that Cindy confided in her that she was being emotionally, physically, and psychologically abused in the marriage. She said Cindy told her that Richard had coerced her into participating in swinging parties. Now, one more thing was revealed in the arrest affidavit. Police are saying that Richard had previously admitted that he needed professional help because he had entertained ideas of killing his first wife, the wife before Cindy. Now, Richard has been arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The stalking and the GPS tracking device elevated this charge to a potential death penalty case in Florida. The DA has yet to determine if he will be tried for capital murder. Richard is being held without bond, and he has denied any involvement in the murder. Crew members from Spirit Airlines remembered Cindy as a beautiful soul who was a compassionate woman, courageous, and dearly loved by everyone. And her father remembered her as a cheery, welcome presence and a woman who had fallen in love with her new career path at Spirit Airlines. As in the first case, where everything is so fresh and new, I'll have to let you know when more things develop. I will be watching for updates. And we have a new case out of Taos, New Mexico. And I hesitate to call it a missing persons case because 53-year-old Melissa Casillas might have voluntarily gone missing. But then again, maybe she didn't. And so I decided to cover her story briefly so that if anyone listening who has information, well, they can go ahead and provide that information to law enforcement, and her husband and daughter can at least know that their mother and wife is safe. Now on Thursday, June 26th, this was a day in the Casillas household that was pretty unremarkable. Both Melissa and Mark work for the Los Alamos National Laboratory. Mark and Melissa rose early that day, and Melissa drove Mark to work at about 6:15 a.m. LANL is a secured research lab, and you just can't walk in and out. You have to have a badge and security clearance. So on that morning, Mark says Melissa was driving, and she flashed her badge to the gate operator in order for her to drop Mark off. Mark says he expected Melissa to head into her work area at LANL, and as he said goodbye, he told her that he needed her to return with the car at about 11 a.m. According to Mark, this was pretty normal for them. She nodded yeah to his request, and he assumed she was headed to another location within the LANL complex. That's not where Melissa went. Instead, she went back home. So that was an hour drive. It really doesn't make sense. But in she strolled to the Rancho Steakhouse home at about 7:45 that morning. Mark and Melissa's daughter Sierra was awake and getting herself ready for work. She said she asked her mom, "What are you doing home?" She said her mom responded that she had forgotten her work badge and that she was just going to work from home for that morning. You guys, again, that's weird. She had her badge in the car as she dropped off Mark at LANL. Sierra said a few minutes later she hugged her mom goodbye as she left for work. And as normal, her mom told her she loved her. All right, we got to fast forward to 12:30 that day. Melissa hadn't returned the car to Mark at the LANL. Instead, she stopped by Sierra's work, bringing Sierra a Subway sandwich and just chatting for a few brief moments. Sierra asked her mom for a favor, requesting that her mom could drop off her paycheck at the bank. Sierra said her mom said she would, and then she left. Video surveillance footage shows that Sierra and Melissa spoke from 12:50 to 12:57 that day. Again, they ended the conversation with the normal "I love yous," and Sierra went back to work, presuming her mother was headed to the bank. Now back at the LNAL complex, Mark figured Melissa had gotten busy in her job and wasn't really all that worried that she didn't show up with the car at 11 a.m. He just adjusted his day and kept working. That was until mid-afternoon when Mark got a phone call from Melissa's supervisor. She asked Mark if everything was okay with Melissa. Confused, Mark said, "Yeah, she should be at work." The supervisor told Mark Melissa hadn't been there all day. Mark immediately texted his daughter Sierra asking if she had heard from her mother that day, and Sierra relayed the Subway sandwich, please go to the bank for me conversation. And so Mark said, "Will you try to reach out to her for me? Maybe ask her if she's coming to pick me up?" Sierra said she would, and she did the very 2025 thing of just taking a screenshot of her text convo with her father and sending that screenshot to her mother's phone. Sierra said her mom's phone indicated she had read the text. So Sierra just left it alone. She thought her mother was going to get in contact with her father. 45 minutes after that screenshot was sent, Melissa was seen for the last time. A family acquaintance says they saw Melissa walking kind of erratically, maybe a little bit of stumbling. They said she was walking on the side of Highway 518. She was headed east towards Pot Creek. Now, the sighting of Melissa was about 3 miles from her home. That part is important because Melissa didn't have her cell phone with her. It was at the house along with the car. And it had been 45 minutes since she allegedly read the text. Now, the sighting was backed up by security camera footage from Kit Carson Electric Company. Melissa was seen in that footage wearing the light teal color shirt, the jeans, and the tennis shoes that her daughter had seen her wearing during the whole Subway sandwich drop-off moment. Well, by this point, Mark's a little frantic. He has left voicemails for both Melissa and Sierra, but Sierra was busy at work and she hadn't answered the calls. When she finally listened to the voicemails, Sierra immediately texted her mother, writing the following: "Dad's freaking out. Why aren't you answering?" This time, her text didn't deliver. Sierra then left work early and headed home. When she got there, the door was unlocked, the car was in the driveway, and her mother's keys and work phone were on the kitchen table. Sierra began searching the home, and in the office, she found her mother's purse, her wallet, and her personal cell phone. Sierra activated the phone, and she got the factory reset screen. The phone had been cleared. Also on the desk in the office was Sierra's paycheck. Her mother had not gone to the bank. Mark caught a ride home with a coworker, and at 5 p.m. he called police reporting that his wife was missing. 2 days later, 125 volunteers showed up searching for Melissa in the area where she was last seen walking. They turned up nothing. Police also used search dogs over the next 4 days, scouring 100 acres near where she disappeared, and then another roughly 240 acres in the Carson National Forest. Again, nothing was discovered. The family has dug through Melissa's documents, and they've been pretty vague about what they found, but they are saying this, that Melissa was going through some high stress and immense pressure situations. They say she might have felt like her world was crumbling around her. They are reporting that the timing of her leaving doesn't make sense. The family was anticipating leaving on vacation the very next day, and she had expressed her excitement about that trip. Mark says Melissa was also in the planning stages of helping her mother through her upcoming knee replacement surgery. She had scheduled a day off of work and was also part of the rotating shifts of helpers when her mother was supposedly supposed to return home from the hospital. Currently, NMSP is operating on the idea that Melissa might have voluntarily gone missing. But they are saying they are working every angle in this investigation and that they have been specifically clearing up rumors that have muddied the investigative waters. Mark asked Dateline to share the following message with Melissa, just in case if she sees their coverage of her disappearance. He said the following: "It is okay. We can solve any problem that might be out there. We can solve it all. Come back. Just communicate with us, and I'll go get you wherever you are. I don't care if you are across the world. I'll go get you. And this too shall pass." Melissa is 5'4" tall and approximately 115 pounds. She has brown hair and brown eyes. She has tattoos: a dragon on her right ankle, a dream catcher on her left shoulder, and a bow and arrow on her left arm. Her family is offering a $5,000 reward for information that leads to her safe return. Anyone with information about Melissa's disappearance is asked to call New Mexico State Police at 505-425-6771. Now, I always promise updates, and surprisingly, we have one just one episode later in the murders of Hollywood couple Robin Kay and Thomas DeLuca. Both of them were 70 years old when they were killed. Okay, remember, they were found dead in their nearly $5 million Encino, California home on July 14th. They had been allegedly murdered by an intruder 4 days earlier. Understandably, neighbors had become very concerned for their safety, so the LAPD held a town hall meeting for residents this week. During the meeting, the police revealed that Robin and Thomas were shot with their own gun. Presumably, the man arrested for the murders allegedly found the gun inside the home and used it against the couple when they unexpectedly arrived home during the commission of the robbery. Now, a senior law enforcement official in Los Angeles, with direct knowledge of the investigation, confirmed to CBS News that the gun did belong to the couple, and he said the following: "The DA pissed off a lot of people working the case in the DA's office and in the police department by sharing the information about the gun in the meeting." Now, the DA's remarks have led to speculation that the suspect had been in the home previously, or the suspect knew the couple. Quashing that speculation, the senior law enforcement official said, quote, "They did not know each other. That's definitive." So, the cops are pissed off, most likely because they didn't want their investigation compromised by the sharing of that information, and They also were probably trying to calm the fears of the neighbors, and that bit of information probably didn't do that. Now, members of the community who attended the meeting told CBS News that they have known for months that crimes were on the rise, and they were enraged that it took 2 murders for a town hall meeting to be held. The police chief told the residents the following: "I've got 750 prosecutors who are on message, on mission, working now with law enforcement every single day to send a message to these criminals that their golden age of committing crime without consequence is done." Now, as the police chief was reassuring the community members during that town hall meeting, 2 more home break-ins occurred while the meeting was going on. Now, no one was harmed in those home break-ins, and the police chief also told the town hall attendees that the suspect that has been arrested and charged for the murders of Thomas and Robin, well, he says that suspect called the police on himself after the bodies were found. Okay, for me, that bit of knowledge validates the original information that police felt like the suspect wasn't working with anyone else or affiliated with any gangs. Now, I'll keep watching this case as it progresses, and I'll let you know if there are any more new updates. And now to comments from Monday's episode. You guys were split on the haunting of the Raggedy Ann doll, Annabelle. Adrienne tried to go to the tour, but she sprained her ankle and she couldn't attend. Maybe the haunted doll gods were protecting you, Adrienne. And Whitney, who had such kind words to say about the podcast, so thank you, Whitney. Well, she said she has been scared of dolls ever since childhood because her grandma had so many creepy ones in her collection. You aren't alone on that front, Whitney. My husband's mom, in her later dementia years, would talk about a life-size doll that resided in the backyard. She was the only one who could see it. Now, Irving said he never believed the hype around the Conjuring movies, but with all the weird stuff going on, he's not so sure now. And Danny, who lives in Pennsylvania, where the tour was happening when Dan died, well, she said on the day that Annabelle arrived in the state, there was an emergency alert sent out statewide about the 911 system being inoperable. Is it a coincidence? And then finally, Julie said 2 days before the podcast dropped, she bought a vintage Raggedy Ann and Andy doll on Facebook Marketplace. She said so far, there have been no hauntings in her house. I always say, keep safe out there. I mean that, even if we're keeping safe from dolls. And that's your Thursday episode of Rise in Crime. Thank you for being here. Thank you for always sharing the episode. I know it's happening because the numbers are growing. So a big request, please keep sharing it. If you're a person who's listening right now and you haven't, I would love if you would do so. Also, please send me your case suggestions. I try to follow up on the ones that can be expanded upon and shared here at Rise and Crime. Please like and follow and subscribe and give 5 stars and the little hearts. Do all the good things that need to be done to help the podcast grow and the other Oh No Media podcasts. Quick reminder, that's Murder with My Husband, Into the Dark, and Rise in Crime. You can join me again on Monday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.